Welcome to Aspects of Writing, a show with a writer in mind. I'm your host, James Kelly, and for the next 60 minutes, my co-host, Janet Corsi, and I will strive to inspire, enlighten, and encourage new writers, as well as to showcase seasoned authors as we discuss the various aspects of the writing industry, including such topics as how to create, format, and even sell your work. So let's get right. Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. My co-host for today's show is Janet Corsi. Our guest is Judy Logan. The topic of today's show is how life's experiences influence our writing. Our guest is Judy Logan. From 2011 to 2014, Judy published 5 short stories and a novel titled Shelter Me, which is available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNobles.com. Judy Logan is a member of several writers' groups in Las Vegas, Nevada. She is an accomplished public speaker and master's level educator. For 25 years, Judy designed and developed educational curricula for a Fortune 500 healthcare system, as well as created and trained a pre-GED curriculum for a New Hampshire school system before relocating to Las Vegas in 2010. Now retired, Judy writes from her experience as a wife and mother, a widow, and a former business coordinator for a psychiatry department in Massachusetts Community Hospital. Her words come from the heart and accurately depict the horror of the domestic violence as conveyed to her in the clinics and the loss and desperation experienced in widowhood, both of which include abandonment, fear, and hopelessness. And Jen, I believe you read Judy's book, so can you give us a little bit of a critique?
Yes. Judy's book is about a woman who's, how do I explain this? She is a widow, but her life as a married woman was that of her husband kept her comfortable. She didn't have to work to take care of herself. Everything was taken care of for her. And now she finds herself in a world where she has to master life on her own. She has to get a job, something she's never done before. And she learns through this experience that nothing's really changed. She's still taking care of everyone else, putting others first.
So, Judy, do you have anything to add to her critique?
I think Jan is right on. Thank you for that very nice summary. I think one of the things that is apparent in the book is that widowhood is a club nobody wants to join.
Yes.
And it leaves you feeling, as you say, vulnerable, and you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah,
it's very difficult at that age.
Yeah, you're taking on the world, something you haven't had to deal with.
How long were you married? How long were you married, Judy?
Exactly. Yep.
How long were you married?
Oh, I was married 38 years.
Yeah. So you can imagine being by yourself after 38 years.
Yeah, it was very difficult, and it coincided with empty nests. The kids had grown up and gone on their own lives, so it pretty much was me and just my cat, and it made for very lonesome times.
Yeah,
and having to redefine everything. I mean everything.
Yeah.
Well, our discussion today is going to be pretty heavy, but we're going to get into a little bit about what your book's about. So whenever we're talking today on our references, feel free to interject with how your book relates to this. We are going to start a discussion today with a few observations of some of the great authors of our time, and I discovered an article written in the Huffington Post by John J. Ross. He's an MD, and the following statements are from our panel is from that article. And Jan, I'm going to let you start.
Swift, DeVoe, Byron, Keats, Coleridge, Hawthorne, Melville, Thackeray. Oh, my goodness. Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath. All lost a parent in childhood. Poe, Tolstoy, and Conrad were orphans. Byron, Melville, Dickens, Joyce, Yeats, and Shakespeare had debt-ridden fathers and sharp brushes with poverty. Shelley and Orwell spent desolated years in brutal boarding schools. Jack London was forced to work in a cannery at age 12.
All right. And Judy?
The honors list of English literature is a roll call of dysfunction. Coleridge was a dope fiend. Joyce and Faulkner were high-functioning drunks. Sylvia Plath was a hot bipolar mess. The epic social ineptitude of Swift, Milton, and Emily Bronte is suspicious for what we now call Asperger's syndrome. Herman Melville was mired for decades in Black Depression, and the Bard of Avon contracted his terminal illness in the wake of a marathon drinking bout.
And what does an unhappy childhood have to do with creativity? In gifted and resilient individuals, stress and unhappiness in youth may help to develop the power of fantasy and imagination. They also increase the risk for mood disorders in adulthood, which have a robust association with literary creativity. Research by Nancy Anderson and Kay Redfield Jameson has shown that writers have a high prevalence of mood disorders, and including major depression disorders and bipolar affective disorders. The final ingredient in this combustible alembic is social awareness, ranging from mild introversion to full-blown social anxiety disorders, as with Nathaniel Hawthorne or Asperger's syndrome, as in the authors John Milton, Jonathan Swift, W.B. Yeats, and Emily Jane Bronte. Individuals with these conditions may be frustrated in their attempts to relate to other people in conventional ways and seek an emotional outlet through literature. To complicate matters, writers may also become physically ill, suffer from dubious lifestyle choices, bad luck, or physical hardships. It sounds like he is saying that writing can be hazardous to health and well-being.
It sure sounds like it to me.
At times it is.
So it's interesting. Well, first of all, I'd like to say, if you're just tuning in, this is James Kelly. I'm the host of Aspects of Writing, and my co-host is Janet Coursey, and our guest for today is Judy Shine Logan. And we're going to be talking about how, what we live through can actually add to creativity, I suppose. Judy, what do you have to say about what we just read?
I think it's very, very interesting that so many brilliant, genius writers have some form of mental illness. I don't know whether we're only now becoming aware that these folks had, different varying mental illnesses along the spectrum, or whether it's always been there and we just didn't calculate it. But I think for me, you just asked the question, is writing hazardous to your health? I think certainly some of these folks who had social awkwardness, Hawthorne and Milton Yeats, blah, 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 they would have been isolated in writing, as is every writer. And I think that if you're socially awkward, that's a benefit to be able to hide away and write. But boy, when you have to go out there and put out your writing or put on play that's based on your writing, it's going to be anxiety-producing and very upsetting. And I think that going back to what Janet said about my book, I think one of the things that the widow does face is her anxiety about having been sheltered, having been taken care of. Now she's got to get out there and fight with the rest of us, in the rat race. And, of course, the battered wife, who becomes a work supervisor, has always been out there, but she lives a secret life. She keeps that hidden at home. So she probably has some kind of emotional disturbance going on for her, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so important to understand that a lot of creativity, we've talked about this before. I think we even said something about it on the last show, about how it doesn't matter how intelligent you are. That doesn't mean you can be a writer, or at least someone who creates stories.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean if you're a creator that you have to have a journalistic background or an education.
Absolutely not. No. I honestly believe that you can work the craft of writing. Anyone can become a good technician of writing, putting the words together properly, the proper grammar, the right words for a certain feeling. I think those things are doable for anybody.
Yeah.
I think where it comes into the creative aspect, that has to be something outside yourself, whether it's, talking to someone else and it stirs your ideas, or if it's reading something, or something just in the world impresses you and you go, wow, I've got an idea for that. One of the interesting things, well, perhaps I'll talk about that when we start talking about Dr. Nancy Andreasen. She has done a lot of studies about brain and creativity. And when I was in the hospital working, I remember one psychologist wanted to write a paper on resiliency in children. And she wrote the paper, and I read it after she wrote it, and one of the secretaries typed it up. And I read it, and I thought, this is missing something. So I had a discussion with her, and I said, you haven't mentioned anything about faith. And she goes, oh, no religion. I said, that's not what I said. You mentioned nothing about faith. And she, well, that's just a projection. I said, faith could be anything. Someone else giving you an idea and saying, go with it, you can do it. Someone having faith in you that you're going to make it through the end. I mean, things that evolve something outside yourself.
Yeah.
Some, I don't know, cushion, some hand, something that carries you when you can no longer write or no longer walk.
A force greater than yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And people think, oh, that has to be religious. It isn't.
No.
It's not even spiritual. It's simply recognizing you are not the center of the universe and that there may be something or someone or lots of things that are going to influence you and impact you to be smarter than you think.
Well, you said did you do some research on Nancy Anderson?
Yes, I did,
Andreasen.
actually. And she's written a number of excellent books. I want to get some now. And I did not realize she was involved with the Iowa Writers Workshop. She is a psychiatrist at the University of Iowa, and she wrote these books, The Broken Brain, about the biological reevaluation in psychiatry, Brave New Brain, Conquering Mental Illness in the Era of the Genome, and The Creating Brain, the Neuroscience of Genius. They have done a lot of studies, MRIs, and brain imaging that has shown different things happen in the brain with people of genius. Mm-hmm. And, of course, all geniuses haven't been imaged. They haven't called me yet. That's a joke. But I'll tell you, for me, it's so awesome to think about this. When people talk to me, they call me the analogy queen, because when people talk to me, I don't hear the words, partly because I'm hard of hearing, but the other thing is, as soon as somebody says something, boom, I have a full-blown image in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't hear the words, I see pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's normal or not, but, so far so good.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things I wanted to touch on, and I know with your book, it does delve into what you know. And I don't know, and part of it is from experience of being a widow, that's all incorporated in your book. And I shared some few things with Jan this morning because I wanted to be able to relate to that as well. I had 2 children's stories I brought Jan this morning that I wrote. And one of them deals with my little doggies.
They're delightful stories.
And the reason I brought that one was because it relates to what we're talking about right now, in that here's this little orphan dog that we got from the pound that was really horrible looking. I mean, she had all her hair shaved off of her.
Ooh.
She's actually a very fluffy dog, but when we picked her up, she looked like she was part Chihuahua.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because they had cut all her hair off. I guess because it was probably matted.
Yeah.
And she had her tail tucked between her legs. She would she would run and hide in the corner. And I do remember that when I was there picking her up, and this is all in the story. This is the creative process of it. I remember picking her up, and I remember that the guy at the pound kept telling me, you have to spend an hour with them to see if they're going to relate. And I brought my other dog, because that's what we were trying to do, is find a companion for my other dog, to see how well they got along. And the other dog just she kind of ignored her. She didn't try to play with her, because obviously the other one wouldn't play, the little one that we were adopting.
Right.
But what happened was that the guy kept saying, if you take her home, you can't adopt for another year if you bring her back. I said, okay. So he repeated it like 3 or 4 times, and I finally said to him, please don't say that to me again, because if I take this dog home, I will not be bringing it back.
Right, right.
And I just felt so bad for this little doggie. I really thought, the way she's acting, who's going to adopt her?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And it's so easy for people to ignore people that they think is acting peculiar or unusual, and so we
Right.
don't connect with them out of
No,
fear
you're
of finding
absolutely
something
right.
else.
Yes, and grief has so many faces, so many tenants. It could be grief for a dog, could be grief for a friend, could be grief for losing your job.
Yeah.
Obviously, grief for losing a spouse or a partner. We don't necessarily understand grief. We can't deal with grief. We figure, oh, this is making me uncomfortable. Stop it. You don't stop grief just because you'd like to.
Right.
It's an ocean wave, and it happens with everything. Anything you love, you lose. You're going to grieve that loss.
Right.
Yes.
And go ahead, Jim.
Well, what I was going to say is that's an example of how, just like with what you wrote, your experiences,
Yes.
you can take your experiences and you can turn them into something creative or positive.
Absolutely.
You
Yes.
know, as sad as that whole scenario was with the little doggy, she's very happy today
She's a very happy puppy.
and looks completely different.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Hair's all grown back, and
Oh,
in
that's
the
so nice.
in the
Well,
story.
I have a soft spot for widows and animals,
Yeah.
and I just had to put my cat down after 13 years.
Oh.
And, her name was Pretty Girl, and the reason being was she was a feral in New Hampshire woods. They trapped her to save her life. She had a broken hip.
Oh.
Her tail was dead. Her teeth were rotted,
Oh.
and she was starving. So they trapped her, and they fixed her hip, cut off her tail, pulled out her teeth, and spayed her, and then named her Chloe. And they were going to have to put her back in the woods. It was kitten season.
Oh my
I said,
God.
you can't do that. No, you
How would
can't.
she survive?
She wouldn't. That's the point. And nobody wanted this poor little ragamuffin cat. I said, you're going to give it to me, and her name is Pretty Girl.
Well,
And
see,
she lived up to that for all those years.
there's a
Took
story.
her 4 years to let me touch her, but she lived up to it.
Yeah. And there's a story
So-
right there.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And, I was devastated when I had to put her down. I cried and cried, but, you love and you lose, you're going to grieve. It's
Yes.
as simple as that.
Yeah. This last February, I lost my little dog Schmuppy after 13
Yeah.
years, and it's devastating. I mean, I literally
Absolutely.
turned circles in my bedroom, going, "What do I do? What do I do?"
Well, this is what this is what the whole show is about. In that we're trying
Yes.
to elaborate on how life's experiences influence our writing, and it really does. I mean, especially if you're writing any novel, there's so much to
Exactly.
life that we can incorporate into. It's like the old saying goes, take lemons and turn it into lemonade, and that's exactly
Right,
what you have to
right.
do. You just have to. Whatever happened tragically in your life, which with all the authors we just read, obviously it was
Yeah.
something tragic that happened in their lives or
Yeah.
became a part of their lives. And they just
But
took
you
and
know-
turned that around and found a way to be creative with it.
That they did become creative, and I have to wonder if it's so much, making lemonade out of lemons as being so unhappy, so frustrated, in such a dark place, you've just got to spit it out, and it becomes writing instead of vomit.
Right.
You just got to get it out there.
Yep.
And oftentimes I've heard an analogy where, a writer is in a deep, deep hole, and he or she wants to get to the daylight, but they have to write to do it. The only way to do that is have people dump dirt on you and step up until you get to the edge of the hole, and then you could get on land.
Right. And that's
Writing
a great
some-
analogy. That is a great analogy.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Writing, I told him the analogy.
Yes. That's
I saw
exactly
the
what I
image
was
right
thinking.
away. But, many times it's not just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and make lemonade. It's, oh, life sucks. This is terrible. I can't get through this. I've got to purge it. I've got to purge it somehow.
Yeah.
And, when you're a widow, a new widow, you purge it in many ways, crying, drinking, carousing. I don't know, whatever your style is, you're going to find a way to let all that negativity out. I
Right.
mean, not everybody goes down that road, but everybody has to purge what was.
Yeah.
And go forward.
Yeah.
And they don't always want to go forward. I didn't want to be a widow, but what choice do I have?
Right.
I could dig him up, but he's still going to be dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm seeing a lot of light at the end of this tunnel because all of these people are famous and crazy as
Yes.
loons. So every time somebody
and
tells
do you know
me,
what happened to Sylvia Plath?
no,
flat, she committed suicide.
Oh, well, let's not talk about her.
Well, yeah, that's
And
that's a different road.
yeah, I mean, many of these people had, alcoholism. Alcoholism is one of the most depressive things in the world.
Yes.
You get down under the ground, so to speak, and you can't push your way up through the dirt. It's really tough.
Yeah.
And then many of these people have these issues, and we don't know if it's because of the genius or they use their genius to turn the other stuff upside down.
Yeah. I remember in 2000, I had just lost actually 3 businesses at once. And I remember how depressed I was. And I thought, this is the end of the world. I'm broke. What am I going to do? And it was Christmas time, and that's the worst time to be broke. And my family's, in another state, 1,800 miles away. And I'm feeling sorry for myself. And then I thought, you know what? Out of that came a children's story, which I haven't shared with Jan yet. But that I wrote in 1 hour. And it was completely from depression. It's actually uplifting, which is odd that it came from depression. But it was in that depressive state that I wrote that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because you wanted to lift yourself up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you were to share that with other children or even other adults, they would relate. Not because necessarily it was Christmas and they were poor or they were broke or they lost someone, but we could all relate to the core feelings of depression, of loss, of, depravity, being hungry. We could all relate to the core feelings, the core emotions. And how we choose to put those out there as writers, it's marvelous because there are always going to be people who can relate to what you've written.
Yeah.
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 Well,
and it's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do to help others recognize that, maybe I'm not so weird after all. Maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not a weeping Lena like everybody called me in the beginning because all I did was cry. No, I had something to cry about. You know, I mean, everything comes to bear on that. When you're a new widow, you're very unhappy and you want to cry a lot. But you remember, if your parents saying, you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about.
Right.
Right.
And then you say, oh, my God, what worse could happen to me? I can't cry. Something worse is going to happen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So all these things in our childhood come to bear, always. And who knows which one's going to flip it and which one's not.
Yeah. I find it fascinating, too, when someone reads your work, like my first book, someone read my book, and they made reference to a character, and then they go, was that you? Well, obviously, I never worked undercover for the government, so that wasn't me. However, there were different aspects of that character that were interwoven with the main character of the story. That was me,
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
And I think
it's like making a cake. Everybody can make a vanilla plain cake. The plain cake dough, and it's all right. One person stirs it left-handed, and might drop a little eggshell in it. Next person stirs it right-handed and might, drop the spoon in it. Everything is like the same, but you're always going to have your personal little quirk in that writing. It's going to come out somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Even if you weren't a government agent, a secret agent, we've all fantasized of being spies. And, if I were a spy, this is what we bring to bear all of those things that we suppose could be.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're just tuning in, my name is James Kelly, and I'm the host of Aspects of Writing. My co-host is Janet Coursey, and our guest today is Judy Shine Logan. And again, our topic is how life's experiences influence our writing. So, Judy, you kind of gave us an idea on what just happened there. But last week, we talked about a disorder called hypnagogia. Let's talk a little bit more about that condition and how it can also be an influence on writers. And Jan, I know we read this last week, but I'd like to read this again, if you don't mind.
Not at all. According to Wikipedia, hypnagogia.
It's HYPNAGOGIA for those listening.
I'm just going to call it the hypo.
Okay.
Is the experience of transitional state from wakefulness to sleep, the hypo state of consciousness during the onset of sleep. Mental phenomena that occurs during this threshold consciousness phase include lucid thought, lucid dreaming, hallucinations, and sleep paralysis. Now, um, Pam Wynn had said she didn't understand the sleep paralysis, but I have in my dream dreamt that I was not able to move, that I had to do everything through my consciousness. I had to make other things move, but I physically could not. And so, very possibly, that is what was meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
That
So your automatic responses weren't functioning.
right,
They were shut
right.
off.
I had to do everything by my mind.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
one of the stories I shared with Jan again this morning, and the only reason I shared these with her was because I knew we were going to be talking about these topics, was another story called The Red Soaks.
Yeah, it was really cute.
And the reason why it's pertinent to what we're talking about now is this is a story that I dreamed just a couple weeks ago.
And it's about red socks.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting that it was, and this was the way it was in my dream. It was just a little child. I don't know if I put myself in that place or what.
Yeah.
And he had red socks, and he had to discuss to his mother about why his red socks weren't called soaks because they were wet. Now,
Yeah.
that's a weird dream. I have no idea why I dreamed something like that. But,
Yeah.
that's part of what we're talking about here, and that's what Pam, shared with us as well, because she's written 48
Right.
books and on her way to 50 in 5 years.
Yeah,
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah, and
Wonderful.
Incredible woman.
so that's why we brought that story up, is because where do these ideas come from when we're sleeping? That has nothing to do with my life.
Right, exactly. And I find that very interesting that story came to you full blown, because that's often the way it does happen. I've done some reading about this, and you will get an idea to solve a problem that you never could have figured out in the daylight hours, so to speak.
Yeah.
Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, wrote that there's a universal consciousness out there somewhere, and that everything that has ever been known and thought and said is accessible. And that oftentimes when we're in a state of altered consciousness, like the state before sleep, just before sleep, or when we're just waking up, we can tap into that. And I have to do a lot more reading to understand it better. But there's an opportunity to glean something from the universe that's out there and is not part of you or your experience or your consciousness
Okay.
until you tap into that. And, so many books have been written about near-death experiences and experiences of, being on the side and coming back and all that. And neuroscientists and neurologists are saying, well, it's the brainstem dying, blah, blah, blah. That's another whole field that has to be explored. And many, I won't say many, but at least 3 physicians have had that experience themselves of being brain dead and yet having these tremendous visions, if you will, in a feeling of actually being with people and talking and seeing another universe. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not a brain scientist.
Right.
All I know is if I get something from the universe, all I say is thank you.
Yeah.
But I can get things outside myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know you've done lectures, and you're a member of several writers groups, and you get an opportunity to hear various authors speak as well.
Yes.
So, have you encountered anything we're talking about on the show today with past authors? Like, what are their experiences? Have they played into what they've been writing, or do they have dreams and write? Because as Pam points out, that's where she gets a lot of her dreams.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of her works
books.
are from dreams. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. I wish they would talk about those things, but they haven't. And I think that even when I give a presentation, I don't tell people I see pictures.
Yeah.
But that's a part of my creative process, and that may be different or odd or whatever. Until I have a brain scan, I won't know. But it serves me. It helps me. I think that we are not always privy to a person's sort of internal processing, what they bring to bear to their writing. And that's not always questioned or shared. I remember Stephen King and what's her name? Amy Tan. They are in a band together, and Amy says, you know what bugs me about being interviewed all the time? And the other guy says, what? And she said, they never ask me about the language. They always want to ask me, what time do you write? What do you eat first? All of this
Right.
physiological
Yeah.
things, but none of the creative process of choosing words and constructing them in a way that is the best possible impact. They never ask about the language. And
Yeah.
language is, a huge, huge uh, field of study.
Mhm.
How we access language, how we acquire language, how we incorporate language. I mean, it's just very. I was interested in Dr. Anderson's comment that oftentimes people will have, as part of this dysfunction that she talked about,
Mhm. Yeah.
they will have unusual use of language. And it's one of the things they talked about under Asperger's, that it's unusual use of language. And I've used language, metaphors, and people look at me like I'm nuts, but they go, "Oh my God, that's perfect. That made
Yeah.
me understand it."
Yeah.
And I don't know how and why, but it just happens. Again, I'm telling them the visual I'm getting in my brain, and that's the closest they're going to come to my internal process, because I couldn't define it if I wanted to. I
Well,
don't know.
the reason we do this show is to actually discuss every aspect of the writing industry. And the
Yes.
creativity part of it is so important. And the real reason I wanted to talk about this today, because we have never touched on this subject this much,
And
is
this is rich. This is
this
very
is
rich
as
subject.
deep. But, it's because there are so many people out there who aspire to write something,
Right.
but they talk themselves out of it.
Yes.
Like we're talking about. I
Absolutely.
have an obsession. I'm a drunk. I'm a drug
Yep.
addict, or I'm schizophrenic, or I'm bipolar. I mean,
Yes.
there's stories there, and if you can just take the time and find a way to sit down and put it all together,
Yeah.
maybe that's one way of what's the word I'm trying to look for here, where you do something to make yourself feel better.
Um, well, I don't know. I was going to say something, but it probably wouldn't be appropriate.
Where's my-
I don't know. First time I'm stumped for a word.
Yeah, I know, me too. But
Gratification.
yeah,
Self-gratification.
right.
Well,
You want to.
gratification.
Yeah, that's one word, and that
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people. I always tell people that's what you should be writing for anyway. If you're writing for the money, you better be an established writer, because you're not going to make it
Yeah.
anyway.
Or have a rich mama or a rich daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
Well,
you should always be writing for yourself,
Yes.
or
Absolutely.
family and friends, but
Yeah.
and then
Well,
hope.
to-
Yeah, and then hope
to
it goes
that
somewhere
point,
else.
a good friend of mine has begun writing just within the last few years. We met at the writers group, and she's now my best friend um, in writing, because we always sharing our writing back and forth. And I bought her a T-shirt that says, "I can't help writing. I have to shut off the voice in my head."
Yeah. Yeah. Hard to do.
I mean, there's something always there driving you, like, I've got to get this out. I've got to put this out there. And you don't say, I'm going to put this out there for Janet and James and, Stephen and RJ. I'm just going to put this out there. I don't
Right.
care if it ever takes. I just want to get it out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's oftentimes, I probably am the least creative. I say this and then people get mad, but
Yeah.
I feel like I have no creativity at all
No,
in
you're
terms
wrong.
coming up with new ideas and things like that. I can't, like my friend can make a story out of something she doesn't know anything about. Me, I have to have an emotional attachment to it, a feeling. And then I go with it, right to the jugular. But I don't necessarily write things that are just stories.
And see,
For me,
I'm just exactly like you said your friend is. If you give me anything, I can create
Yeah.
a story out of it.
Yeah.
that's
I'll just sit there and
wonderful.
create a story.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
But
Yeah, I can't come up with ideas. If my husband was so creative, and he was a factory worker. He worked at a steel place, and he could not read and write, and yet he supported me all the way through my master's degree, emotionally and financially. We both always worked, but he had the most profound imagination. And I'd say, Frank, give me an idea. Well, I don't know what to say. Just give me an idea. I'll write something.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
yeah,
Well, he was one of those folks who had, the social anxiety and nonverbal communication sort of thing. But if I could have picked his brain, we both would have been rich, because he had a rich imagination.
yeah.
And I wonder if it wasn't because he couldn't access learning in the traditional way,
Well,
and television was his teacher.
I
So,
think in my case, a lot of times it's you become overwhelmed if you start thinking of too many things.
hmm
And I have done that. I've had days where I've had 3 or 4 things I'm thinking of at the same time,
Yep.
and then you just shut down because
yes,
you know.
Yep.
And that's why I admire Pam Wynn in the way she's able to tap into all this thought process, whether she's sleeping or awake and ideas come to her, and actually sit there and write it. Because,
that's wonderful.
that's, to write almost 50
Yeah.
books in 5 years, she will have completed
Wow.
50 books in 5 years.
Right,
That is
exactly.
amazing. I mean, I can start
Right.
50 books, but I'm not going to finish 50 books, I can tell you right now. Uh,
I can't write. I can't read 50 books in 5 years.
and
Th-
she
there you
reads
go.
6 or 7 books a day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's a speed
exactly.
reader.
You just gave me a thought. You always do anyway. But when you were saying, you got to get it out there, and about Pam, writing them, putting them out, no matter what affects her. I was thinking of all the dysfunction amongst these, illiterati, these genius authors, and the fact that they did, take an alternative to maybe get away from that driving force of creativity, maybe to shut down the voices, maybe to turn off
Ooh.
the creativity. If you take a drink, you feel like, oh, good, I don't give a shit what happens anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry for my language, but, that kind of thing. I've seen that happen over and over again. People may be taking a time out by being either an addicted person or perhaps some of this mental illness is a time out from
Yeah.
reality and from pressure. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, I know for me, I wrote my book because I was mad at what somebody was saying on TV. And
Okay.
and I knew exactly how my book was going to end in order to get
Mhm.
my point across.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my character disagreed. And so my book didn't end the way I wanted it, the way I
well, they
originally
take on a
designed
life
it.
of their own.
They do. They're
Yeah, they
they're
do, really.
they're a bunch of crazies.
And I've read your book, and I enjoyed it very much, Jan. Very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that's where you go is
Exactly.
in your head.
Yep.
But
Yep, exactly.
what I find is interesting, though, is that we all do write. You, like you said, yours was something that you saw and decided you wanted to write. I
To
guess
fix it.
Yeah, to fix
To
it.
fix it.
I write from everything. I mean, my dreams.
Mhm.
Someone may say something that'll give me an idea, or like the book that's just getting ready to come out actually came from watching television,
Oh, good.
National Geographic, and I had to answer that question, like,
Right.
what is this about? And this doesn't make sense to me, so I need to make it.
Mhm.
I need to make this make sense. So that whole
Right.
book came from that whole perspective.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So we do.
I think-
For me, I write from every angle.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. I know I'm affected by things, and once I'm affected by something, I will write on it. But to come up with a creative idea, say, oh, I want to teach everybody how to drive a truck. I'm not going to write a story on a truck driver. That
Right.
just does not move me.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But
Right.
if I find out that women are excluded from being rate clerks, which I was back in the 70s, women were not allowed to rate the manifests for the bills of lading
Oh,
because
uh-huh.
they were women. And Dr. Anderson talks about that being the fact for her as a woman in the psychiatric environment.
Uh-huh.
And actually, from her, an article on her, there was a link to this man who was a scientist writes of life as a female scientist, and biologist who underwent sex change describes biases against women. And I'm like, what? Well, this man changed his gender from female to male so that he would be respected and he would be given opportunities. And sure as shooting, he got lots more of them than he did as a female scientist.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yep. And so, I mean, all these things come to bear on what we can do, what we're allowed to do. I mean, I thought there was a very creative way for him to, get over the glass ceilings and not
Uh-huh.
being taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it permeates everything when we think about it. But when something moves us, we are interpreting that feeling we've had about that issue for other people. And there are bound to be other people who feel the same or who will take the counterpoint, which is fine too. I just want to start a dialogue. I just want to start, my point for writing my book was education. I want people to know how bad domestic violence is. I want people to feel badly for the widow. I mean, a young man read my book. It's a wonderful young man. And he said, I love the battered wife part. And he said, after reading about her husband, I promised my girlfriend I'd never punch holes in the wall anymore.
Wow.
And I said, you do that? And he said, well, yeah, I get frustrated and I punch a hole in the wall. I said, well, the next time you want to punch something, punch a pillow. It's less expensive and it doesn't make as much noise and you won't scare your girlfriend as much. And then get some anger management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said to him, well, what do you think about the widow? He said, I don't care about her. I said, why? And he said, because nobody stays married that long anymore anyway. And, how can you be with somebody 40, 50 years? And, I said, I hope you get married someday.
Yeah. Something tells me it wouldn't last.
Right. Not everybody's going to relate to every character in my book.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one guy that, looks like he's a savior for the battered wife, but is he? I mean, when you read the book, you say to yourself, that's kind of questionable behavior.
Yeah.
And, that sort of thing. So not everybody's going to come away with the same thing, but we're interpreting the world as we see it and as it affects us, and there's bound to be people who agree or disagree, which is fine.
I'm just curious, Judy, are you working on any other books?
Yes, actually, I'm working on the sequel. I got off track for about a year and a half. I had some major illnesses, but now I'm back on track, and I'm going to get that out this year. And I'm always writing short stories. It's so much easier.
Yeah.
You can just bang those out in 2 days. But, the book took a hiatus, and, it's hopefully it'll get out there soon, and people will at least remember what the first book was about.
Well, and the thing is now you have more experiences to incorporate in your next book.
Absolutely. And the other thing I want to do, James, I'll give a little heads up to everybody. I want to write about domestic violence from all perspectives. I want to write it about a gay couple or a lesbian couple. I want to write it about a child parent when there is domestic violence in the home, an adult child with an elderly parent. I want to write about wherever there are two people and one is a bully, there's going to be domestic violence.
Yes.
And you have to stop thinking, how can they have domestic violence? They're lesbians. Hello?
Yeah.
One's a bully.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Right.
How can you have domestic violence with two gay men? Hello? One's a bully. You're going to have domestic violence.
Yep.
And I don't think people expand their understanding enough of domestic violence to recognize that it's everybody.
Yes.
Right.
Wherever there are two people and one is a bully, there's going to be violence.
Yeah.
Simple.
But you also need to get in the mind of the bully, because
Yes.
most of them don't believe they are.
Right. And I mean, for every woman that's battered, if she has a son, he's seeing that behavior, and he may follow it or may, go the total opposite and just deify women, put them all on pedestals,
Right.
which doesn't allow him to relate as a real person.
Right.
Well,
yes.
years ago, 20 years ago, I did a lecture group, and one of the women who came to my lecture group wanted to write a book about her struggles with, and I can't remember what the disorder was, but her father was one person to the business world, and when he would come home, he was a different person at home.
Yeah.
And she finally, out of our discussions, wrote that book. And I think that's the other thing from what you're talking about is we look at people who are together, and we think that everything's wonderful in their lives. They appear to be the happiest couple in the world. What we never know is what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
Exactly. And that goes on for any couple. I don't care if, gender, orientation, whatever. Every couple.
Yeah.
We
Right.
don't know what's going on. And we may miss the signs. We may miss the opportunity to help. I think we do have to be involved, and we do have to help. We just have to moderate, our help and our telling them what to do. You can't tell someone what to do. What you can do is to tell them the options and then let them take it from there.
Right.
You know? But I mean, it's pervasive. It's just pervasive. And, well, for instance, in the last presidential election, I was talking to a woman who was making calls for Hillary Clinton. And I said, "Oh, how's that going?" And she said, "Well, I had one woman say, I would never vote for that witch." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." And I asked her why. And the woman said, "Well, her cheating husband, has humiliated her, and she's still with him. She should have gotten rid of him." And my friend said, I said to the woman, "You mean because she was violated by adultery on her husband's part, you're going to violate her a second time by knowing more than what she does, need to do in her marriage? You're going to victimize her twice?"
Right.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really. And so we never know what's going on in people's homes. So you have to
That's right.
be observant, you have to be caring, and you can't be judgmental.
Well, I think that's the part I like about what you're doing, too. You're writing a book of fiction that actually deals with very serious topics in a way that incorporates or gets the reader involved and thinking about the aspects of what you're writing about. In other words, if you were to just write a self-help book on the subject, there's hundreds of those out there. Someone may go to it and read it if they feel like they have a problem.
Right.
But by writing a book of fiction, people may pick it up because it's a book of fiction, and they may be able to relate to it and say, "Hey, this might be me." And now that so by writing and incorporating it into fiction, in a way, you're doing a service to a lot of people that may not otherwise realize they have a problem or need to find a way to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, that pleases me because that's the whole point. When I worked in psychiatry, I was devastated watching these women and children. When I came out here in 2010, I volunteered at Safe Nest, which is a wonderful, wonderful shelter and resources for battered women and children, and for perpetrate. What do you call them? the people who are doing the battering. And,
Perpetrator.
Thank you.
You got it.
And, it was wonderful. Unfortunately, I was working full-time at also, doing the volunteering. It just became too much, and I just couldn't do it anymore. But it's something I'd love to go back to at some point. And you can't go there and, sit in judgment because you don't know what you would do. If your husband, or I always think man and woman, sorry, if your partner says, "Oh, yeah, you leave me, I'll kill that little dog of yours."
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
"You leave me, I'm going to get the kids out of school when you're not even looking, and they'll be gone. You'll never see them again." These kinds of threats, this blackmailing and terror and all that business, we can't judge. I can't even judge a batterer, much as I dislike people beating up on other people. I can't judge him or her. I don't know what's going on with them. I know I have to find a way to help them stop that, but I can't judge them.
Right.
So, and that's the whole point. You cannot be judgmental because if you are, people won't come to you. People won't confide in you.
Amazingly enough, we all hear this and we've all said this. If I was that woman or if I was that man, I know what I would do. No, you don't.
Exactly.
You don't have a clue or a concept until it lands in your lap. You have no idea.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And I remember one tragic circumstance at the hospital. It wasn't even the people coming into psychiatry. This was a physician who was married to a woman and had 2 daughters, and they had a very high lifestyle, very, very wealthy. And I overheard her speaking to the development director, who was another woman. And the first woman, the wife, said, "I don't know what to do. He's cheated on me again, and it's just killing me. I love him so much." And the development director said, "Are you stupid? Do you like your lifestyle? What can you earn on your own? You were a technician. You weren't a nurse or a doctor. What are you going to make for your daughters? You're going to put them in the projects? You're going to, make them wear ordinary clothes? Or do you like the country club lifestyle?" She said, "If you know what to do, keep your mouth shut and your head down and just live with it."
Oh, how
And I
awful.
thought, what rotten advice. But it's what the woman did, and her kids graduated from the best colleges in, the country, and then she was able to go off on her own. But had she not, had she had, you know, less tolerance
Right.
and less investment in maintaining her lifestyle, she might have thrown him out and
Mhm.
said, you know what, you're either mine or you're not mine.
But
So
but
you're
you
either
know,
mine or you're out.
but
But who knows? Who
but
knows?
but you see,
You don't know.
that's the part of our books.
Yeah,
People making
exactly.
sacrifices, being selflessness
Hmm.
Well, and I think
Well,
that's the
for
great
others.
thing. That's the great thing about novels is that you actually can see a different perspective or side of what human life is about. For example,
exactly.
if
Yep.
what we're talking about is with abuse, someone who's never experienced it and doesn't understand it, they may read
Right.
this and think, boy, this is really made up. But probably
Right.
it's written from someone's perspective of something that either
Hmm.
happened in their life or knew someone that it happened in their life. It's no
Right.
different than
Exactly.
someone who's super wealthy, who's trying to decide what to do for the poor, but have
Right.
never experienced being poor themselves. It's very
Exactly.
hard for them to comprehend what that person's going through, what their daily struggles are, and just trying to put food on the table or pay the bills. It's hard for
Exactly.
someone who's never had to do that to
Hmm.
envision that. Now, possibly they could pick that up through a novel again, but then they
Yes.
start thinking,
Yes.
is this reality? Or, boy, that person really was creative. So
Yes.
that's why
Exactly.
novels are important. It takes us inside the world that we live in, and
Hmm.
it expands it to us in a way that we can't even imagine sometimes.
Exactly. And I mean, unless I'm reincarnated, a billion times, I will never know what the people on this planet are going through
Yeah.
Well,
unless I become those people and experience it myself.
that's why I'm
But
coming back.
through a novel, I can begin to get a sense of their experience in one capsule. One capsule. Not a whole lifetime, just one capsule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like domestic violence or like widowhood. I mean, my widow could have had all kinds of medical issues and problems.
Right.
Um, yeah, yep. And that's the whole thing. You cannot judge. I had a woman say to me after I presented one time, and it's probably not what I should talk about, but she said to me, "Oh, well, look at you. You're lovely. You're smart. You've got a degree. Blah blah blah. No wonder you can write well." And I looked at her and I said, "Did you notice that I don't breathe very well?" She goes, "Well, yeah, you get breathless." I said, "No, I lost a lung to cancer."
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "And did you notice that I often get a little stitch in my side on the right?" She goes, "Well, yeah." I said, "I lost a kidney to cancer." I said, "You want to, exchange business cards or exchange, luck? I've got luck. You don't. Come on, lady. This is what I can do. This is what I'm putting out there. Don't take that away from me. You don't know anything about me.
Yeah.
Right.
Nothing."
Right.
And,
Well,
she was obviously jealous and not able to, look beyond the success of a book. And you
Yeah.
can't judge. You can't.
no.
So
Well, my inability to read is actually due to a lack of intelligence.
I highly
No,
doubt
no. I have
that.
college. I have some college, but the point is that education has nothing to do with it especially when it comes to writing, like we talked about
No,
before.
Yeah.
no.
It actually has nothing to do with life. Actually, I mean, people are very
Right.
successful oftentimes that never even graduated from high school.
Exactly.
So we can't. And I think that's where we put ourselves. We put ourselves in that state of mind that I can't do this because I
Yes.
don't have the education background that I need for
Exactly.
this, and it's not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So
And the sad thing is, when I went to college, it's a long, arduous story, and I won't get into it. But when I went to college, I was already in my 40s,
mhm.
and I didn't get my master's till I was 50. And I can remember, thinking, "Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'll be 50 by the time I get my degree." Well, I was going to be 50 anyway, so
Yeah.
may as well keep shooting for the degree. And it wasn't the degree per se, but I had studied literature. My whole 4 years of undergrad was literature, which
Uh-huh.
was a huge mistake. I learned all the great writers, but I didn't learn how to write. I learned how to analyze someone's writing. I didn't learn how to write.
Yeah.
So at the end of my 4 years, this wonderful woman, Emily Meyer, she was my one of my English instructors. And I took her for 4 semesters because she was so hard. And at the end, we had to write either a paper, or we had to write a scenario, like a little play. So I chose the 5 women that we had read of and did a play between the wife of Bath, Miss Havisham, Daisy from Great Gatsby, and Janie from Your Eyes Were Watching God, and then another person, I forget who. Well, I wrote a play that was hysterical. And she writes it, my final paper, you've wasted 4 years. You should have been in creative writing. Thanks a bunch.
That's good.
Well, Judy, we're running out of time. We're down to the last minute of the show. And I would like to thank you. Our guest today is Judy Shine Logan, and my co-host is Janet Corsi.
And Judy, how can our listeners learn more about you? Where can they go?
Well, I have a website. I haven't kept it up, but I'm beginning to get back into it now. It's judyshinelogan.com.
Okay.
As I say, I had some illnesses, and you don't do much when you're hurting, so.
No.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
thank you for having me on the show. This is wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome, and we're going to try and upload this version to YouTube. All they're going to see is me and Jen sitting here in the office. We didn't even go to the big room to record today.
No.
So,
but this is so unique right here. I like this spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. So you'll
and
be
we just
able.
got back from Hawaii.
Oh yeah, it looks like it, doesn't it? Anyway, if you'd like to log in and look at some of our past shows, just go to youtube.com/aspects of writing. That's youtube.com/aspects of writing to learn more about the show. And also you can visit our website at aspectsofwriting.com, and you'll also can click a link from aspectsofwriting.com to go to YouTube as well. So Judy, again, I'd like to thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. My pleasure.
You're welcome. Until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you again.
Great show, guys.
Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing. We hope you will join us next week as we discuss every aspect of the writing industry. Until then, if you can dream it, you can write it.